Steve Carell left the office in season 7 out of 9 total, just around halfway into his second term as President of the United States. Richard Nixon resigned. And Roger Waters played bass in Pink Floyd for 20 years before departing the group that went on to record multiple albums without him. Sometimes people just leave something halfway through it. And as we're gonna find out today, sports are no different. It's rare, but a few times throughout the lore of different sports, an athlete has picked it up and called it quits right there in the middle of a game. Not just on that season or team, but on their entire career. These are the athletes who retired mid-game. During a preseason game in 2019, the Bears were playing the Colts. The game is in the middle of the fourth quarter. The 7th and 8th stringers are in right now, fighting for practice squad spots, but for some reason, thousands of Americans are racing to get this game on their television. Its viewing numbers abnormally skyrocket for a preseason football game. This isn't because the Bears just extended to a 2-possession lead. This is because some news just broke that Colts quarterback Andrew Luck, who's not even playing today, would be retiring from football. Oh. Luck was on the field when the news broke, and after getting booed off of it, that personal choice from him would derail the Colts franchise. But his abrupt retirement wasn't the first of its kind, and it wasn't nearly the worst. I'm not counting Luck on my list because he wasn't playing in this game, and he didn't mean for it to happen like this. Him being out there was just a tough situation. But our first case to go over, he did it all on purpose, and that's Vontae Davis. Vontae is the elephant in the room here, the most glaring example of this topic. September 16th, 2018. The Bills and Chargers head into a Week 2 matchup. Vontae Davis is starting the game at cornerback, as he usually does. This Bills secondary wasn't slacking on paper either, with Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and Tre'Davious White. That's a secondary of 4 Pro Bowl players at one point in their career. But that didn't help them Week 1, as the Ravens clobbered the Bills every which way, 47-3. So coming into Week 2 here, this Bills team needs to show up to build some stake on the season. Unfortunately, that's not how this game starts. On the Chargers' first drive, Vontae Davis gets completely beat in coverage in the end zone. Even the safety over the top couldn't help, and Mike Williams caught what was his first career touchdown. As the first half continues, the Chargers continue to run it up. 36-year-old Phillip Rivers carves up this defense, embarrassing them for the second week in a row. Melvin Gordon has 3 first-half touchdowns. Vontae Davis gets pushed around some more and starts to think to himself. He let a second-year player catch his first touchdown today. He was being humiliated by a middle-aged man named Phillip. And that body of his that had been through its fair share, it was aching. Vontae Davis went on over to the sidelines and told his coaches he didn't feel like himself. As the team jogged into the tunnel, Vontae went with them. He checked himself out of the game and he didn't emerge back out of the tunnel for the third quarter. And that was it. Vontae Davis was done playing football. Forever. Now let's be fair to Vontae. He was a 30-year-old NFL cornerback who had a long list of injuries in his history, and his body went through way more than any of ours ever will. But let's also acknowledge the irony of 6 years elder Phillip Rivers being the one to do this to him, the guy that played the undefeated Patriots on a torn ACL. Ultimately though, it was his body that made Vontae Davis quit. The contrary to Andrew Luck retiring for mental health reasons, Vontae went out to the much more common physical health. But did he have to go out mid-game? Vontae said he meant no disrespect to his teammates by doing that. He could just feel when he was out there that it was his time. It felt different than any game he's ever played, he said, but his teammates didn't seem to understand, and they didn't hold back in the media.
Pop Warner, high school, college, pros, never heard of it, never seen it, and it's just completely disrespectful to his teammates.
Did he say anything to you as a
Did
veteran?
he say anybody to
He
anything?
didn't say nothing to nobody.
He left? When did you find out?
You know as much as I know. I found out going in the second half of the game.
So we got to the sideline, you know what I mean, offense going, so we about to punt. Coach was like, y'all get ready. He was like, yeah, I'm done, young boy. I looked, I was like, hold on. He was like, yeah, this my last go round. So I looked at him, I was like, what you mean? Like, this gonna be your last year? He was like, nah, this gonna be my last game. I'm done, man. He said, say that boy, say it.
Vontae was a great player. I remember growing up seeing him make some of the most athletic plays I've ever seen, but he left the league unable to even finish out a second half of football. Still, Vontae Davis got further into his game than our second athlete today, who didn't even make it through one inning of his baseball game before leaving for good. John Kruk is one of baseball's glimmering reminders how normal, awesome people can sometimes be professional athletes. If you're unfamiliar with Kruk, there's an old Chicago Tribune article that called him the John Belushi of baseball, but no, I still don't think that fully does it. Okay, here, a quote from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. He chain-smoked cigarettes, didn't watch his weight, and proudly wore the same t-shirt day after day, which proclaimed him as a top-notch mower. Yeah, there we go. That's John Kruk. An all-star level player for an impressive career, Kruk was a great hitter with multiple seasons going above 300. But the man full of twists had one left in him. It was a late July game in 1995. The Orioles and White Sox were squaring off. Kruk entered the game hitting just below 300 for his whole career. Right away, in the top of the first inning, John Kruk records a blooper base hit. Just after this, he checked himself out of the game. John walked into the clubhouse, he changed, and drove home. He threw on the TV. Oh, the baseball game's on. Let's catch that. John Kruk watched the very game he played in from his home after leaving the ballpark forever. While watching, John giggled to himself as he heard the announcers question where he went. They came to a conclusion based on a limp he had that it was maybe a hamstring injury keeping him out. It wasn't. John Kruk was done. You see, once John got that single, it officially upped his career average to exactly 300. Couple that with his perfect 100 career home runs, and there's your reason why John Kruk retired in the first inning of an MLB game. He got his single and he was done, never looking back. Years later, John would tell the story himself, adding the detail that he communicated with the pitcher through a middleman to give him an easy pitch, informing them of his plan.
So I asked him, I said, who's pitching Sunday? And he said, Scott Erickson. I said, is he a good guy? He said, oh yeah, he's a really good guy. I said, will you do me a favor? I said, we suck. I can't get a hit. I don't want to go back to Chicago. I want to go home. He goes, what the hell are you talking about? I said, well, if I get another hit, I'm retired. He said, all right. I said, can you tell Scott Erickson to throw me just a nothing BP fastball right down the middle?
And unlike with Vontae Davis, Kruk's teammates weren't too upset. He had been open about his desires to the whole team, and he was a great player, ready to be put out. That's why he kept his teammates' respect, and that's why he was able to get an easy pitch from an opposing pitcher. That's not something just anyone can do in the MLB. People like John Kruk. The same can't easily be said about our next athlete, who has polarized the sports world in ways no one ever has in a single lifetime. From record-breaking seasons to buying an Arena League football team and not paying his players, Antonio Brown really has done most of it. And barring what would be the greatest comeback in NFL history for the 35-year-old, his final game that sent him into retirement was quite the iconic affair. A Week 17 matchup between the Jets and Buccaneers was the center stage, and the star was Antonio Brown.
Yo, what it is?
The Buccaneers came out slow, and we even got past halftime this game as they trailed by 2 touchdowns. Then, seemingly out of nowhere to viewers watching at home, Antonio Brown, who was just playing in the game on the field minutes ago, is seen without a shirt, hyping up the crowd on his way to the tunnel on the live broadcast. What? AB had 3 catches this game, 26 yards is all he totaled. Not a great game, but this was a 12-4 Buccaneers team, heading into the playoffs regardless. The frustration of losing to a bad Jets team is understandable in some cases, but this just isn't that big of a game. We were able to learn shortly after a little bit more how Mike Evans attempted to restrain and talk Antonio Brown down, but ultimately saw what everyone else saw, his teammate going out sad. AB felt like he wasn't being used in the Bucs offense right, the offense that would ironically come back to win this game without him, but the weird timing and display was enough for the Buccaneers to cut him, and no other team has come sniffing around, making this his last game, and this his last run down a football field. Football, though, I guess is the common sport for athletes retiring in the middle of games. I don't honestly know why that is. It's not like there's anything about football that would innately influence players making random spur-of-the-moment, bad life-changing decisions, but it's funny. I have just 6 of these guys to talk about, only 4 of them that truly fit the definition of retiring mid-game, and half of them are football players. And these were really the only professional athletes I could find guilty of this. But before we cross off the last football player, let's change our focus to soccer, where I've scrounged up a story about David Cox. David was a Scottish soccer player, at the time suiting up for the Albion Rovers squad. Now, David was very open about his previous mental health struggles, even telling the story publicly about how he attempted to take his own life. Overcoming these struggles and returning to be a pro soccer player again, it was a prideful thing for David. He wore it on his chest, but it was also out there, it was public. In a game against Stonehorsemire in Scotland, David started the first half playing well. Near the beginning of the second half, though, David Cox was nowhere to be seen. He later showed a video to social media saying at the beginning of the second half, in some trash talk, an opposing player had a go at his mental health, telling him he should have done it right the first time. At that moment, David walked out of the park and called his career quits. He wasn't going to put up with any of that. Say what you want about him, but he knew who he was and he removed himself. And that's not too unlike our last athlete today, who wasn't so fed up with other people or other teams, but with his own. I have to cheat a bit for this last one, because Mike Wallace didn't retire here, but he did indeed walk out on his team. Wallace is one of the premier speedsters of the last generation, walking so that Tyreek Hill could run really fast. He played for a myriad of teams, filling the same speedster role wherever he went, but on his second team in Miami, Wallace faced a situation he was not in love with. Being paired with a young, developing Ryan Tannehill at quarterback and a mediocre team, frustration mounted for Wallace. After he was overthrown on deep balls one too many times, Wallace was done. In the final game of the year, in 2014, Miami faced off against the New York Jets. Late in the second quarter, with Miami scoring a touchdown to take the lead, Mike Wallace walked off the field and told his coach he didn't want to play him. And so he didn't. Miami went on to lose their lead and lose the game by 13 points. Multiple members of the Dolphins team felt betrayed and abandoned by Wallace's move, and his mid-game escape wasn't even the weirdest part. Post-game, in the locker room, reporters were antsy to talk to Wallace and see what was up with him asking not to be played. Luckily, he was there. Not so luckily, he didn't say a single word the whole interview. Wallace had his friend and teammate Brandon Gibson instead answer questions for him.
Just don't want my dog to say anything wrong.
Now, Miami was already out of the playoffs, and the Jets were too, so this was the year's last game without any real importance. And shockingly, Mike Wallace played elsewhere the next season, taking his talents to Minnesota. And he went on to have a lengthy career, basically making him defy this list. However, I had to include him because it's just such a rare thing. This is as close as it gets for the last one. Athletes hanging up the cleats while a game is going on around them, it's a niche, mostly unseen act, but when we get to see it, it always provides a special little story. Let me know if I missed anyone, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning about these memorable retirees. If you really liked it, comment down below. Maybe we'll get a part 2 of 3,000 college athletes that retired mid-game. It happens like every week.
You don't want to throw me the ball and you making me like I'm crazy. So it's like, I'm crazy? Fuck all you motherfuckers. I'm out of here.